Hi guys, welcome to our Researching, Teaching and Learning presentation on our Action Research project. My name is Samuel, here with me is
Aricha, Kim,
and Anika.
Thanks guys. So as a group, we sort of discussed what we wanted to get out of our Action Research project. And when we were talking, we discussed how we thought having a positive teaching and learning environment was the best thing we thought of to have as a teacher. So if you had a positive learning environment, it was easier for your students to learn and work in together with the teacher and to improve the engagement levels, motivation levels, and the outcomes of students. So we sat down together and we sort of figured out, well, what sort of things do we need to foster this positive learning environment? And within that, we came out with our 4 individual questions. So me personally, I was looking at how important teacher-student classroom environment are, whereas Kim, you were looking at?
and I'm looking at the importance of providing positive feedback and positive reinforcement on the classroom environments.
And Anika was?
I'm looking at how does the classroom climate and setup influence the learning environment.
And finally, Haricha looked at?
How does a teacher with clear instruction and consequences affect the classroom environment?
So moving on, we discussed our literature reviews together, and
Yes,
Kim will be discussing this further.
Yeah. So when we sat down,
My bad.
okay, when we sat down as a group, we discussed and pulled out 4 key ideas from our literature review. We found that teachers can create a positive learning environment by motivating and engaging students, supporting and structuring student learning, maintaining positive teacher-student relationships, and supporting and reinforcing positive student behavior. Now, with supporting and reinforcing positive student behavior, one of the articles by Marzano and Pickering and Pollock mentioned that rules should usually be written and spoken regularly to ensure that students are able to enter the classrooms with familiarity, which increases their learning outcomes. And another article by Lester also mentioned that not only does it increase their learning outcomes, but it reinforces positive student behavior within the classroom environment. So,
yeah, linking onto that, with the student outcomes and the positive behavior, I found out in my literature review that those student outcomes and student behavior are actually influenced by positive teacher-student relationships in the classroom. So if there's a positive teacher-student relationship vibe sort of in the classroom environment, then students are more engaged, they're more motivated, and they're more likely to behave in a more positive manner. I also found out through Split, This and Human that both the teacher and the student, their well-being is affected by teacher-student relationships. So if there's a positive teacher-student relationships, then that also gets influenced by their well-being. So their well-being is improved from positive teacher-student relationships. Anyone else?
Yeah, and also from my literature review, it's focusing on more supporting and reinforcing the positive student behavior. By Martins and Phillips, they reveals that it is important for the teacher to work on how to increase students' sense of school appreciations, meanwhile develop their understanding of contents, because once the student realize that the contents they were taught in school is practical and valuable in their future life and career, then their motivation and engagement in the classroom will also increase. And I feel like, yeah, it's a very important thing that we as a teacher should really implement that while we're teaching, like adding more personal value and all that, so in order to get the student to engage in our classroom and then create more activity, which is like tells them that, hey guys, this is critical and then it's important in your future, rather than just tell them like, hey, this content, hey, this, do this or that.
Yeah, absolutely. Anika?
Yeah, so in my research, I also found out that having good student-teacher relationships are very important. This is seen in Egberg and McConney 2018, and they say that positive classroom behaviours were present in atmospheres that had good student-teacher relationships. So just making sure that the teacher is open-minded and also considers the types of interests that students are engaged with. Yeah.
Yep, awesome. So that's what we all sort of found together as part of our individual literature reviews. Now, the next step of our action research project was to look into actually collecting data on our individual questions, and Kim will be talking about that further.
Yeah, okay, thanks. So next slide, we're gonna talk about the data collection. So our group has used 3 different methods: to interview, surveys, and observations to gather, to individually collect all the information. And here is the key themes that we sitting together and then have pulled it out. So the first one would be creating positive teacher and student relationships, motivating and engaging students, implementing positive and negative reinforcement, and last one is the utilizing effective teaching structures and strategies. So from my own data collections, I conducted 4 different interviews, and what I've got from my interview with the teachers is that students' negative behavior would not be changed even straight after the punishment if they could not find the meaning and the importance behind the punishments. Therefore, teacher would have to explain the consequences and the effects of the matter to the student rather than just punish them. And also using negative reinforcement can be risky because if that fails, then it would cause the student to dislike the teachers, and as the result, it will affect the student-teacher relationship as well. And also maybe, however, for some students, negative reinforcement might work better, but for the majority of the students, as a teacher, I think we better use the positive reinforcement.
Yeah, so like mine, I used observation, and I would say that it focuses a lot on utilizing effective teaching structure and strategies, and also the first 2 dot points in this PowerPoint slide, as the teacher gave specific step-by-step instructions to the students. She also gave instructions inside and outside of the classroom so that students are constantly aware of the rules and what the consequences will be if they break those rules. So, yeah.
Yeah, awesome. And throughout my interviews, in my individual data collection, I saw how these sort of key themes interrelated with each other, but they all sort of stemmed from teacher-student relationships. So if there were positive teacher-student relationships, this led to better engagement from students, better motivation for students to learn, and it was able to, when teachers have that positive relationship with their students, they have a better effective teaching structure and strategies that they're able to utilize. And basically, when they are using positive reinforcement, or if they're using negative reinforcement in a beneficial way, then students react well to this majority of the time, and that makes the relationship that students have with their teacher more beneficial. And throughout some of my interviews as well, a lot of my interviewees talked about the well-being of teachers and students and how that is incredibly benefited when the relationship between the teachers and the students is a positive one, and how it is affected in a negative way if their relationship is not so healthy. And there's a really good quote from one of my interviewees saying that when there was a teacher that actually put in the effort and put in the work with the student and actually tried to relate to the student, that changed everything for that student, and they actually ended up improving their outcomes, improving their engagement, and actually did really well in their studies.
Yep, I actually have something to add on that. So one of the observations that I did showed that the teacher really thought about differentiating for the range of students in this classroom. There was it's a mixed ability classroom, and one of the students I was looking at had this low ability, academic ability. So therefore, she made like specific changes to it, and it also falls back like to what the articles I've talked about earlier, that by having this kind of step-by-step instructions and making this differentiation for all this range of students, also able to have that be able to create a smooth lesson for both teachers and students.
Yeah, and so like the students see that as well when they know things are going well, and the teacher sees it as well, so they know they can sort of see when the transition between activities is running smoothly, when the activities themselves are running smoothly. and students see that and they know things are going well. I guess that makes the lesson more enjoyable for them than whether if it's a bit chaotic and the transitions are off and sort of like that, then it's a bit harder for the students to actually be enjoying the classroom, and this in turn sort of affects the relationship between the teacher. There was also a good sort of a discussion I had with one of my interviewees saying that a majority of the time, whether a student likes a subject or not is more related to their teacher in that subject, so whether or not they like the teacher rather than the subject itself. So he was talking about how students are more inclined to not like a subject if they didn't like the teacher and not really in terms of the actual subject, which I thought was quite interesting.
True.
Yeah, and so from my data collection method, which was surveys, I learned that a lot of the survey respondents said that it was important for teachers to support student learning and making sure that the learning is focused on students and that the classwork is engaging for them. They also noted the availability of resources in the classroom and making sure that teachers and students have good relationships between each other. So one of my participants pointed out that the teacher needs to work as being the positive reinforcer in the classroom in order to create this positive classroom climate, such as handing out merit certificates and giving out verbal praises. Whereas some of the other participants noted that things that didn't create a positive classroom environment included things like the level of noise, the unavailability of classroom resources like dictionaries. Other things that also contributed to this included misbehaviors, minimal opportunities for students to contribute, and personal use of technology in the classroom.
Yeah, exactly. That's awesome. Sorry, was there anything else?
Yeah, so Ruzik and Schenk pointed out that some of the psychological aspects within the classroom environment is important as it impacts on their student outcomes. So it's important to have good classroom constructs and making sure that students are aware of a set classroom structure and routines.
Yep, awesome. So you can see how all of those sort of our individual data collection related to those individual key themes that we found out, and how in the classroom environment, if all these things are running smoothly, then we have that positive learning environment. So if teachers are able to use this, then they can have that structure and positive relationships in the classroom to have a learning environment that students are actually willing and welcome to come to. Our final point is sort of an implementation of our research and what has been informed by our literature review and our data collection. So more on that, Annika will touch on that.
Yep, so some of our proposed action research project strategies and key thoughts included having a check-in activity as part of the last activity focused on in the last lesson of every week. So this gives the teacher opportunities to interact with the student and see how they are doing personally with the work and making sure that they are emotionally okay in the classroom. This also gives them time to give students positive reinforcement and feedback with their classroom work and to motivate them to do better next time. This also gives the teacher opportunities to ensure that students are aware of undesired behaviour and addressing misbehaviour in the classroom. Thank you for listening to our presentation.
I think that was actually a pretty good run through as well, except for